with ADHD, what are the things about it that people just don't get? Story 1. People don't get how exhausting it can be to constantly fight with your own brain to do the simplest tasks, or how deeply it affects your self-esteem when you're labeled as lazy or inattentive. Story 2. It is truly a special kind of to be a perfectionist in the deepest reaches of your soul, but at the same time, not have the drive or ability to achieve said perfection. Story 3. I am absolutely dying to do the thing. I want to do the thing more than you want me to do the thing. Not having done the thing is ruining every minute I spend not doing the thing, but I can't do the thing right now. Story 4. I wish people understood that ADHD doesn't just affect your ability to focus. It really needs to be renamed. ADHD changes your brain chemistry and the way that different parts of the brain communicate with each other, which means that it has a ton of symptoms that affect every part of our daily lives. We have trouble with executive function, which means that no matter how hard we may want to do something, we may not be able to force ourselves to do it. We struggle with motivation because every task is high priority, yet our brains don't reward us for completing them. We have sensory issues because we cannot control which things to pay attention to and which things to block out. Some of us, like me, are not capable of blocking anything out unless we're hyper-focused, in which case I will sometimes literally forget to breathe. We have auditory processing issues, and I couldn't tell you why. As far as I know, it's just to make our lives harder. On the bad days, speech has no meaning, it's just sound. It's like the adults talking in Peanuts cartoons. We want to listen, but it's just noise. We have trouble regulating our emotions. It's different for everyone, but for me, emotions are either unbearably intense or non-existent, and there is no middle ground. There's so much going on for us at any given moment that it's no wonder we can't pay attention. It's exhausting. It's not cute or funny, even though we do enjoy poking fun at ourselves. I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that most of us would give anything to have our brains function normally. Story 5. I trip and stumble over my words constantly when I'm speaking, because by the time I've finished a single sentence, 3,000 hours or new things happened in my brain. Story 6. The environment around you can really overstimulate you when it doesn't bother others. Then you get irritated and people don't understand why. Something like Chuck E. Cheese or an arcade is pure. Story 7. The irrational rage when someone innocently interrupts a hyperfocus. The frustration of desperately wanting to do the task, but the brain is like, nah, what about unimportant thing? Story 8. ADHD often comes with an auditory processing disorder, especially in women. People don't understand I can hear you just fine. I'm not going deaf. It's just what you said to me is either processed as complete gibberish, or if there are multiple other sounds in a small area, I input them all at the same volume. The TV is the same volume as the dishwasher, which is the same volume as the dog scratching her back, which is the same volume as what you just said to me. It's sometimes impossible to sort unless I am looking at your face as you speak to me. Story 9. Rejection-sensitive dysphoria is a big one. RSD makes us sensitive to criticism and rejection, whether or not it is real or imagined. This colored the majority of my interactions as a teen and made maintaining friendships very difficult. Seeing friends hang out without me, being told I did something wrong, people not responding immediately. It made me very sensitive to the idea of being annoying while simultaneously making me very annoying to interact with. I see so many adults with ADHD and untreated RSD that frequently lash out from a place of insecurity. Working on it will drastically improve your outlook on your social life. Story 10. Hypervigilance is exhausting. It's like the dumbest version of what the guy in Psych does, except it's all anxiety-based and intel gathering for better masking. You're spotting micro-expressions on people's faces or sauce on their tie and wondering if they don't like talking to you while also trying to guess which chicken sandwich shop they ate lunch at. Now you're thinking which shop is your favorite and then which country invented fried chicken. All of this stupid information is a traffic jam blocking what Bill from accounting just said, and you just want to run. Story 11. Object permanence. If an object doesn't have a home where it belongs, it ends up in a pile or lost. If I can't see something, I forget it exists. There are a bunch of clothes hanging in my closet that I've forgotten exist because I don't see them. Dressers don't work. I have to fold my clothes and stack them on a shelf where I can see them at a glance. Food often gets tossed to my chickens because I've found it at the back of the fridge when it's already past its prime. Grocery shopping once a week is really difficult because I have to plan and shop for a week's worth of meals rather than just a meal or two that are on my mind at the moment. Edit this started as a list. As someone pointed out below, this is not the definition of object permanence, though some people who have ADHD do struggle with it, myself included. Please don't go to your doctor and tell them you have ADHD just because this resonates with you. Story 12. There's a lot of things that folks with ADHD deal with that sound super relatable to everyone and makes them say, haha, oh yeah, I'm like that too. One example I've noticed is that if you've got something you have to go to later in a day, such as a doctor's appointment, it's hard to get anything done before then, and it feels like you're just kind of existing until then. The problem then, and the big problem with having ADHD, is then having to try and explain just how massive an issue it is for someone with ADHD to someone who does not have it in comparison. Like what a massive wall this late appointment is to get literally anything done. It's hard to explain how a minor inconvenience for most is a colossal problem for us. And that's partly because it is just extremely difficult to explain what is happening in your head, especially in a way that makes any rational sense. The best I've heard it put is that it's like trying to knowingly place your hand on a hot stove. Story 13. That without my meds. I'm incredibly unpleasant to be around and struggle to do basic tasks. Yet, every month I have to fight for them because of the class of drugs they are. I know they're stimulants and susceptible to abuse, but they don't do that for me. I only notice when I don't take them because I start to get irritable and fatigued. They don't get me high at all, they just give me a better baseline. But I'm treated like a drug seeker every time. Story 14. That meds really make a huge difference. I was diagnosed at 36 after 2 graduate degrees and a bar exam. I was so pissed off when I got meds because I suddenly didn't have to spend 40 of my brain power hacking my brain. It's like a computer constantly running Adobe Photoshop or some other massive program in the background. It slows everything down. I could have been president by now with a childhood diagnosis and access to drugs. It's this easy for neurotypicals? You just do the thing? What the? Story 15. Time blindness is crazy. I don't get it on the small level, like hour to hour. But I'll swear up and down we talked to each other a few days ago, and it will have been months. My brain is going a million miles an hour, especially if I'm in an upbeat mood. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten something as dumb as flushing a toilet just because something broke my routine. I got off the toilet and there was something weird on the floor in the corner, so I looked at it, washed my hands, and headed out. I'm not disgusting, I swear. My brain just breaks sometimes. If I remember to, before I leave, I'll take inventory. I washed my hands. I flushed the toilet. Keys, wallet, and phone are still in my pocket. I'll repeat to myself all morning. Take out the trash. Take out the trash. Take out the trash. Put the trash in the bin, and then forget to wheel the bin to the curb. Story 16. ADHD isn't just attention issues. It's intense emotional roller coasters that we hate going through and sensory issues. Also, interacting with neurotypical people is very draining for us because we spend the entire time masking. We may love you to death, but we mask without even wanting to. We need chances to recharge our social battery. Story 17. I'm not forgetful. I'm not just not paying attention. My attention is like a laser beam, not a spotlight. I'm hyper-focused on one task at a time. Literally, time stands still and will focus everything on that task. I'm also trying my best to prioritize those tasks knowing I can miss things. Even if it's simple. Like I went to the store. There's ice cream. I need to get that ice cream into the freezer before it melts. I also know if I do anything before that, you'll forget. So I'm grabbing those bags first and getting those things in the freezer. Boom, got that done. Yet where the heck did I put my keys? Story 18. Many who have it don't even realize it because their doctor misdiagnosed them with depression, and the medications are doing nothing to help. That is how I found out I had it and eventually got tested. A random telehealth counselor noticed I was resistant to every antidepressant I was prescribed and suggested ADHD testing. Blows my mind how no doctor or psychiatrist ever considered that to be a possibility in the past. Yet some rando with an associate's degree figures it out after a few minutes. Story 19. How easily it is to forget. I get a lot of flack for forgetting conversations I've already had, or a task I had planned that unfortunately time had went by. People swear that I'm not listening, which isn't the case. I just don't always remember events, and it's frustrating for myself too. Really, it is. Story 20. That women are so grossly misdiagnosed because it presents just different enough that it gets mixed up as anxiety, BPD, depression, etc. I've been diagnosed with anxiety and depression since I was 16 and now, at 35, have been diagnosed with ADHD. Depression and anxiety tend to be comorbid, so the ADHD gets missed. It's not all bouncing, happy, hyper behaviors, particularly in females. Story 21. I'm going to throw a positive one out there on behalf of my ADHD sister. I think people don't understand that ADHD can also be an asset, in a way, if people become more accepting of neurodiversity. My sister is incredibly intelligent and has pretty severe ADHD. She works in surgery, and the fast-paced environment actually works really well for her. She can channel her brain side, as well as the super-focused side of her, depending on what's needed. Something about that environment makes it easier to train your brain to switch back and forth between those modes at the appropriate moments. Her son is just over 1 and clearly also is extraordinarily intelligent and has pretty severe ADHD. Because she understands him so well, she's just been focused on creating a supportive environment so that he can thrive as a very intelligent ADHD child. If there were more parents like that, I think the potential of ADHD folks would truly be unlocked. Story 22. I know you know what it's like not to want to do something, but I don't think you can understand how that means. I actually can't until the anxiety of not doing the thing overcomes the not wanting to. Story 23. Being told you're so smart, if you just applied yourself, you could do anything your whole life really kills your self-esteem. When I was a kid in the 80s, my mom refused to medicate me for my ADHD. Her logic? If he could remember the secrets to his Nintendo games, he could remember his times tables. After that, my mom beat me and grounded me for bad grades, and even allowed my stepdad to beat me because of bad grades. All the while, every adult in my life, even the ones that were beating me, were telling me that I could just solve my problems by focusing, applying myself, and getting good grades. I was so smart, and they were so confused as to why I wouldn't just sit down and do my schoolwork, even though a psychologist told them why when I was in the 3rd grade. I was gaslit my whole life to believe that I would never be able to achieve my dreams at best, or stop being beat at worst, all because I couldn't do my schoolwork. Teachers, friends, family, all told me it was my fault, and I believed them. This carried into my 20s, where I fought my own brain to not end up in jail or in prison. I finally started my Adderall treatment at age 27, and it changed my life. I'm 45 now. It took a couple decades to learn that it wasn't my fault. I was a good kid, and the adults in my life failed me. Story 24. That it's not that I can't pay attention. It's that I can't regulate attention. The distress at being overstimulated and not being able to calm my nervous system down enough to do something, anything, to get out of decision paralysis. That I don't mean to sound sharp and irritable. I'm just super overstimulated, and I feel like I'm being pecked to death by ducks while standing in front of a turbine engine. That I'm really good in emergencies. The calm, quiet clarity I get in a dopamine rush of an emergency means I'm definitely your go-to when things get crazy. That my time blindness has its upsides. If I haven't seen you in 10 years and then I do, everything I felt for you then I feel again. I never stop loving you. When I think of you, which is really often but usually in the middle of the night because I never sleep, which is why I don't reach out, I remember every positive, wonderful thing I ever felt for you and I wish good things for you. Not staying in touch is not indicative of my feelings for you. If I ever loved you, I still do. And I'll always be excited to hear from you that there are a ton of physical challenges that can come with ADHD, hypermobility, headaches, huge sensitivities to anything from smells, to touch, to taste, to not having insight into when we're hungry or when we need to stop eating. Our brains just don't communicate with our bodies in the same way at all. Those are just off the top of my head. Story 25. Mental fatigue is real. Please let us nap when we need to. I'm not trying to be annoying or one-upping you when I try to tell a relatable story or metaphor of what you're going through. I'm trying to show you that I understand what you mean. I can't stop arguing when I'm in the mood to. Last-minute plans can be overwhelming. Planning too far in advance is just as bad. I am listening to you while playing Tetris. I'm actually playing so that I can hear you better. I'm not physically hyper, but my brain is. And sometimes my mouth. Story 26. In order to accomplish almost any task I have to feel massive guilt or sheer panic. Either way, my brain has to be going 110 just to get 10 of the motivation I need for life. Story 27. Probably the impact on how their home is organized. People with ADHD often organize things using piles. They stack important and frequently needed things out in the open. This is because if they put stuff in the piles away, they know they won't be able to find it when they need it. To neurotypical people, their house can look very messy. They may even chastise the person or offer to clean it up for them. But to the ADHD person, this can be extremely harmful. They know what is in their piles and how to access it quickly. If someone moves it or throws it away, it can trigger a lot of trauma around losing things. This also makes it harder for them to complete tasks. A big hurdle for ADHD people taking on tasks is friction. Changing how their things are organized adds a ton of extra mental and emotional work to otherwise easy tasks. They now need to look for the thing and deal with very negative emotions as they do so. Now they've got task paralysis, they're spiraling, dopamine seeking to self-soothe, and the whole day is shot. We should talk about this aspect of life more openly and remove the stigma around it. There are many effective strategies to organize a home around ADHD needs. Methods that reduce stress and make life more comfortable for the person living there. They just might not result in someone else's view of tidy, which shouldn't matter at all anyway. Story 28. You know the phrase that pisses me off? I think I also have a little of ADHD. Like what? No, you don't. This is when the conversation of ADHD comes to the front, and suddenly, people hit you with that. Story 29. No one has mentioned the rejection-sensitive dysphoria. It's a massive one for me and has had a really big negative impact on most of my relationships. It's also held me back from forming relationships. I'm hoping that now I know what's going on, I can tackle it a bit better. One positive, I have amazing problem-solving skills because I'm hypercritical and I see things in multi-layered ways. Story 30. There's no I just don't want to, and there's no I just don't care enough. It's seriously a struggle when people tell you it's a self-discipline issue. Story 31. How much mental work goes into things that seem simple? When I finally trained myself to put my keys down in the same place when I came in the house, it took months and months. I had to constantly narrate what I was doing mentally or verbally so I could be aware of where my keys were. Things like turning onto my road and my keys are in the ignition. Putting the car and the keys are in the ignition. Turning off the car and the keys are in my hand, with more steps up to unlocking the door and the keys are in my hand. Putting the keys on B table. I was able to reduce how much I had to narrate, but months and months of doing this. I wish I could explain what it's like to be hungry and cold and have to go to the bathroom, and also the idea of getting up seems impossible. Being disappointed in yourself for the texts or calls you don't respond to, or all the cool ideas that come and go and nothing happens with it. And also that medicine doesn't make you more hyper. It can make you finally sleep because your brain shuts off and you can sleep. When I first started taking medicine, I slept so much because I was so sleep deprived. Sometimes when I wake up early and can't go back to sleep, I'll take my meds early because I know my brain. With shut up. Ever seen a movie or TV show where there is a scene where one person is talking at another to annoy them? Or because they are being annoyed? That ends up being my brain keeping me awake. Mediation never worked for me before medicine because of how much I was thinking. Story 32. I'm not relaxing when I'm not getting to tasks. I spend the entire time feeling extremely stressed and frustrated by the fact that I can't get myself to complete them even if I know exactly what I have to do, or if they're things I should want to do. Story 33. This is more for parents, and especially my parents. It's abhorrent to raise a diagnosed child unmedicated and think you can just yell the ADHD symptoms out of them, to just belittle them for every symptom they exhibit, and to constantly express disappointment in them for not functioning like a neurotypical person would. If you truly think this is the solution, you. Story 34. Cleaning is hard. You start cleaning one spot, but then you gotta move something to another spot, but that spot's not clean. Then you start cleaning that area, which leads to cleaning other stuff. Now your clothes aren't put up and it's just a lot. Story 35. I'm visiting home for the holidays, and this is a pent-up frustration. People my family assign character traits to symptoms of ADHD. Simple mistakes get extrapolated to lazy or incompetent, or expect someone else to do the work, when in actuality, it's just a symptom of ADHD. Anecdote. I left a glass unwashed and got into a major fight with my family when I was accused of purposefully leaving behind because I expect my family to be my maid, and I snapped. I live on my own. I forget to wash a glass, and guess what happens? The glass stays there. You'll eventually notice it, think whoops, and wash it. End of non-eventful story. But the second I live with other people, I'm under a microscope. The way I live and honest mistakes are constantly being misconstrued. It was exhausting growing up as a kid, as a teenager, and as an adult visiting home. It hasn't gotten any better. This type of thing wears on you, and a big part of therapy for ADHD is undoing this negative self-punishment, and then neurotypicals come along and undo it. Living on my own was such a huge boost to my self-esteem, to not have to mask at home or have people tear me down when the mask inevitably slips. Living with other people, whether it's family or roommates, is so much more exhausting. I get that I'm not always the best roommate or daughter or whatever, but it's really not on purpose. Story 36. The emotional dysregulation and rejection-sensitive dysphoria. I'm still struggling to understand it myself. I thought everyone experienced emotions as overwhelming, out-of-control things. Story 37. I haven't successfully cleaned a room fully in years. I just do my best to do stuff daily, and everything gets done eventually over time, just not in any sensible manner. I can start dishes and end up replacing screws in a board on my front steps because I had to take out the trash mid-dishes. But then I noticed my broken second car I've been ignoring and need to understand how to change a fuel pump via YouTube on a 2005 Corolla. But I can never buy the part because I'm paralyzed by the checkout cart online. P.S. I bought the part today, finally. It took 6 months and probably 8 attempts of adding the car part to my cart and buying it. Story 38. The narrator in your head. They don't have that, so they can't understand it. Edit. I was just very rudely informed that the narrator inner monologue is not correlated to ADHD, while the validity of my diagnosis was questioned. Seriously, don't do that. Story 39. It's exhausting losing items. I lose stuff all day, every day. I get so angry with myself. My brain shuts off 34 of the way through a task, and I never remember putting down what I am holding, let alone where I put it. Why can't I just be normal and remember where I put stuff? It makes me feel so stupid and inferior to other adults. Story 40. Everyone has ADHD. Now no, dawn's an actual low dopamine condition with real-life consequences. Just because you're obsessed with TikToks and don't have any attention span doesn't mean you have it, you idiot. Medication works for some people but not others. There is no one-size-fits-all cure, and you don't outgrow it. Story 41. People tend to be very forgiving and understanding of autism as a serious diagnosis without realizing just how similar ADHD is. There's a reason we share so many symptoms. Also, executive dysfunction is a. Story 42. ADHD has an incredible body of research going back to the 1950s. It's most definitely not a made-up condition or a case of kids being bad. It's not a conspiracy theory where teachers or parents or doctors or big pharma are wanting to put kids on drugs to keep them in line. Fundamentally, ADHD is a dopamine and epinephrine deficiency. Those two hormones regulate emotion and the feeling of satisfaction and joy you get when you are actively engaged with something. Where normal people can hold attention to things and stay on task, our brains get bored, and we feel an instinctual need to keep searching for things to scratch that itch. And that search isn't sequential. It's parallel. Well, juggle 5 different distinct thoughts at once. Imagine trying to read a book while 5 different TVs are on different channels at max volume. When we are put on stimulants, we are basically getting those levels back to your normal baseline. So, counterintuitively, we often find such meds as calming and quieting because we don't have to exhaust ourselves constantly fighting our wandering minds. One of our biggest problems isn't being too active. It's a perceived lack of action. We suffer from executive dysfunction, the decision paralysis trying to sort through the competing thoughts. Once we manage to get started, we can be okay, but transitions between tasks are incredibly hard, especially when interrupted. The counterpoint of this is hyperfocus. When we finally get into something that interests us for better or worse, we really dig into it and obsess on it at the expense of everything else. There are some benefits from it, though. We get really good at pattern recognition and making quick reads on people. We have an often uncanny ability to tell you right away who the bad guy in a movie is, or what throwaway line 90 minutes ago was going to end up being key to the plot of a story. In social situations, we are often great judges of character. ADHDers tend to travel in groups because we inevitably seek each other out, along with, often, autistic and LGBT people who also deal with feeling misunderstood and constantly stressed. We seem to also be disproportionately creative and imaginative, which is why so many artists, actors, and writers have ADHD. Professionally, if we can find jobs that are varied enough to keep us from burning out, we can excel at seeing the whole board and anticipating issues and outcomes long before others. Story 43. Skip thinking, especially during conversations. My mind works so fast it'll already be a few sentences ahead of what you're saying, and insufferable me will blurt out my bit before you finish speaking. A. Because I want to hurry this along. B. The impulse to contribute and show you how I'm interested is just too much. And B. If I wait any longer to say it, I will forget. So people go off me really fast because they think I'm not listening, and I interrupt, which I do. But not for the reasons you think. The skip thinking also happens when I'm talking. I'll rapidly make 7 onward connections in my mind but won't articulate them. So the stuff I come out with seems pretty off the wall and weird because I've made a load of connections in an OODA loop that is too fast for me to explain. It's a bit rubbish being so alienating. Story 44. That our symptoms is not something that everyone has in some degree and that not everyone has ADHD nowadays. I stopped talking about ADHD with anyone because of that. Story 45. Rejection sensitivity has nothing to do with being well-adjusted or self-reliant, and it take a lot to deal with maturely. The weirdest spike of it I had was walking into town one day instead of getting the bus, and when it drove past me as I was walking, I felt it. It has nothing to do with how I feel psychologically about the situation. It's just my brain noticing a potential source of dopamine being taken away, I guess, however trivial it might seem to others. Story 46. The lack of focus is not the worst thing about ADHD for me. The worst part is not feeling in control of my emotions when I am dysregulated. I feel like I'm stuck in a tiny boat, and my emotions are giant ocean waves, and I have to do everything just to not fall out and drown. Story 47. The struggle of losing friends because you forget they exist. When I say forget they exist, I don't mean you completely forget them. But it's more like, if I don't see you every day, I forget to check up. It sucks because a lot of people will literally stop talking to you and think you're a horrible person because you don't check in. I hate feeling like the feeling with people is still mutual, but in reality, it's not. Story 48. I know I have to do the thing. I want to do the thing. I plan to do the thing. I have every intention of doing the thing. I spend hours psyching myself up to do the thing. Yet, the thing doesn't get done. Story 49. Just how shameful it is to be forgetful. No, I didn't do it on purpose, and no, I don't hate you. It's just that my brain latched onto this rabbit hole of information or special interest since then. And I've managed to file your information away in a place where, when I'm reminded of it, I'll remember every detail, but otherwise is otherwise unreachable. Yes, I've tried memory tools, and those aren't very effective because I forget to use them after the novelty wears off. Story 50. How much caffeine it takes to self-medicate. Because my doctor thought I was some sort of addict because I lived in a town full of addicts and officially diagnosed at 26 despite suffering for years. Also emphatically beer helps. I'm not sure why, but it does. I took an IQ test. I'm incredibly smart. A lot of people with ADHD are. It's the inability to focus that is so frustrating. I stutter over words. If I'm thinking too hard about something, I'm passionate about, my wife giggles about it, but some people, audacious as they are, insult over it. I hyperfixate on things. If I'm in project mode, I'm not ignoring you. I'm using maximum effort to get things done. Story 51. That it isn't really a hyperactivity disorder at its core. You would act the same if you had a constant sense of unease, which is what drives hyperactivity, not a desire to bounce around and do more by itself. Story 52. How incredibly aggravating it is to listen to someone drone on and on when I understood what they were saying half a second into their sentence. Just hurry up and spit it out already. Story 53. You don't have ADHD just because you sometimes forget where you put your keys or can't focus because TikTok killed your attention span. ADHD is a neurological issue and not a funny quirk. It's Story 54. I'm not ignoring you. I legitimately don't hear you asking me a question because I am hyper-focused on something else. So when you yell your question at me annoyed, it is the first time I heard it. Imagine if I asked you a question first time by yelling at you. How would you react? Story 55. There was a clip of a video I saw while searching for something else. LOL ADHD that hit me way harder than I realized at the time. Basically, it said that ADHD children, especially AFAB children, are constantly lied to growing up. You're called lazy, bad, rude, etc. when the actual fact is you're a really well-behaved child with ADHD. You aren't lazy. You're parsing through way more info than others understand and have no executive function to decide what is and isn't important. You aren't bad or rude. You're literally doing exactly what you were told. In the context of ADHD, this increasingly snowballs as the ADHD child tries to self-correct where no correction is needed and gets further false accusations and recriminations as feedback. This kind of thing growing up leads to crippled adults who have a completely incorrect characterization of who they are and how the world sees them. It's like complex PTSD, but no one recognizes the source or is willing to treat the problems caused by a lifetime of being lied to about who you are. Story 56. Starting medication for ADHD was a challenge. I'm on Vyvanse now, but it took me a year after my diagnosis to even consider trying it. I was terrified of becoming dependent on it and feared that people will think I'm a drug addict. It took a long time to accept that I am dependent on it. And that's okay. I have a disability and need support to function, just like someone with a mobility disability relies on a wheelchair. Quoting someone from Reddit, the ADHD hacks that we need to help ourselves remember things, and when we forget to do the thing, we beat ourselves up. I have AirTags, medication reminders, sticky notes in my entryway to take out the trash, take my meds. We do things like putting our wallet in our pair of shoes to remind ourselves that we need to put our wallet in our pocket before we leave. ADHD tax money and time. Forget something at the grocery store even though I wrote it in my grocery list on my phone. ADHD tax. Need to buy AirTags because I keep misplacing my keys? ADHD tax. Packed up leftovers at the restaurant and forgot to take it when I leave because I was not present when I was packing the leftovers, or I was distracted for half a second because I needed to put my jacket on. ADHD tax. Story 57. You don't have ADHD, you're always early for things. Yes, I am early. Very early. spends an hour in the coffee shop round the corner from the appointment early, because the alternative is that if I aim to be early by a normal amount, like 5–10 minutes, I will be 15–30 minutes late. And it took me years to train myself into this excessive earliness. And it has never become habit. It's a battle every single time. Story 58. My brain is a machine with the self-greasing function broken. When I can't do something that I really want to do, that's because a circuit breaker in the machine tripped to protect itself. If I go in there and push the gears forward manually, all screechy because they're running dry, will cause damage. My brain is trying to protect me by not letting me do things, because it isn't making chemicals right. I don't know if this is anyone else's experience, but after years and years of pushing through things unmedicated on sheer miserable force of will, my brain started sending me pain signals, unspecified physical pain, because I was trying to do the dishes. Now I take medication and I say things like, dishes don't hurt when I take my meds, and apparently this really weirds people out. Story 59. Please let me F-King finish what I'm working on before asking me to do something else, unless you want that first thing to never ever get finished. Also, don't tell me this thing needs to get done at some point unless you want me to do it immediately, because the future is a black hole of never unless there's a calendar appointment. Story 60. Yes, I was perfectly capable of doing that other task. Yes, I was perfectly capable of doing this same task that other time. Yes, you'd think that would mean that I should also be capable of doing this task right now? But I'm not. No, it doesn't make any sense to me either. If I knew what magic thing made me able to do those other things and could replicate it on demand, I would do so. I have spent 15 years trying to figure out what that magic thing is, and I still haven't got an answer. Yes, I know this is annoying. I am also very annoyed by it. I'm annoyed now, and you'll be even more annoyed later when I'm suffering the consequences of not having done this task that I should be doing. And no, being fully aware of that fact still isn't going to make me do it. I want to do the thing. I can't do the thing. I can't explain why. I don't know why. I hate it. I'm sorry. Story 61. Overcoming the tendencies is not a matter of willpower. I've lived with it long enough that I know my patterns and can predict my behavior. This barely helps, and sometimes I still cannot do much about it. For example, gaining an all-consuming interest in a hobby, philosophy, lifestyle, anything. Investing in it with money and soul and dropping it completely in a short amount of time. Or an inability to stick with something or give it the proper attention even if you fully realize how important it is and how much your future self would appreciate the commitment. I'm no expert, but I liken my inattentive ADHD closer to autism than to hyperactive ADHD. It's a difficult life, but has a few benefits at least.